have our studio here for the first round table. Is everything okay? Okay. I'd like to invite the people who are gonna be with part of this round of this table. Let's invite there Miss Abner Lobão, Mr. Claudius Van Martins, Miss Elizabeth Cavalhais, Jorge Venancio, everyone here on stage. Moreover, we're gonna have some online participants. It's not only you, we also have online participants in our event. João Batista Silva Jr., Daniela Luchetti, and Lemet Huargo. Welcome to everyone. I see everyone here on the screen. Thank you so much to be here. Welcome. If I can say like that, I would like also to tell everyone who's watching virtually to stay here. We know that's not the moment that we wanted to live. We know that everybody's going mad. So many problems have arisen, but we know that's the safest way of doing here. But if you are here, even though you're virtually, you can be part of our discussions. You just use the chat now on the side so you can follow everything. Everybody who's part on the round table, I'll ask Tony to be the mediator and to start speaking so we can talk many contents about this cause. Tony, that's now it's your turn. Now, think we start now our first roundtable for clinical research with the participation of family and patients to offer approval. To discuss this tempo, one of the most relevant with this cause, we we have Mr. Abner Rodão, Medical Director of Takeda since 2005, Claudio Martins, Clinical Coordinator for Research, Medicine and Biological Products of Anvisa, Dr. Daniela Luquette, Medical Geneticist, Associate Professor at the University of Washington, and member of the Rare Disease Division and Medical Genetics of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, who is there here on the lab with us. Ms. Elizabeth Cavalhais, Interpharma President, Association of Pharmaceutical Industry Research, who represents more than 50 pharmaceutical pharma labs responsible for innovation in health in Brazil. Mr. João Batista Stuner, manager of blood, tissue, cells, and organs of Anvisa. Dr. Jorge Venâncio, coordinator of the National Research CONEP. Mr. Lembed Lago, General Secretary of the International Council of Medical Sciences for the HWO and UNESCO Associate Partner. It's a pleasure and an honor to have you with us. Let's start this conversation with an overall view. Since one of the oldest bodies of the WHO has dedicated to participation of patients in clinical research consistently. Dr. Rago, could you say that it's possible to identify signs of understanding the importance of this topic? The governments and the industry identify the result gains in with the participation of patients in the development of new health technologies.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the understanding has been improving, and I think it has been speeding up during the last 5 years or so, I would say. So, of course, to a certain extent, industries have been a bit running ahead and governments and regulators a bit following the course. But I think the regulators are nowadays also very well equipped, at least in some jurisdictions, especially in Europe, in the European Medicines Agency and US FDA, that we have the honor to have the representative here. There is more and more done to involve constructively patients. And what I would like to point out is that we are not talking here only about the patient or the proxies or the parents of the kids involvement in the regulatory process of approval of the products, but we are talking here about involvement of patients during the whole life cycle of products, from the very early stages of development until post-approval stage for safe use, and finally, if that comes to the point, also removal from the market. So it's much more comprehensive picture today, and we are moving in this direction. And I'm happy to say that also we have in CIOMS, in Council for International Organizations of Medical Sciences, we have our working group 11, which is specifically dedicated to this topic. They are now trying to finalize the very extensive, thorough report, the patient involvement in development and safe use of medicines, which when the working group feels that it's mature, we certainly probably in 1 month's time, if the speed of the development allows, we will put it into the public consultation on the website. Thank you.
Muito bom. Mais uma pergunta para o senhor.
Another question for you. CIOMS promotes the discussion of this topic in different levels. How countries in developed countries and although in development, in your opinion, how can the UN make a difference in this discussion?
Thank you for this very good question. And this is partly why the Council for International Organizations of Medical Sciences has picked up this topic. So yes, we are not exactly UN, but we are very in close relations with both WHO and UNESCO. And of course, as we picked up this topic in a very systematic and comprehensive way, there is also hope that other UN family organizations, and I'm not talking here only about specialized agencies like the World Health Organization, but some others may be also picking up this topic in a more serious way. I would not say that UN family organizations are already not doing bits and pieces, but I think there are always, as always, by the way, in healthcare, you can always do better than you do. No matter how good you are, you always can do better. So I don't know any hospital who can't do better. I don't know any agency who can't do better. So we certainly can do better. And there are a lot of avenues to try to find new methodologies, new ways of trying to more constructively, comprehensively, and systematically to involve patients in the interest of having more mature product developments, and also, which is equally important for me as I'm also a medical doctor, the safe use after the approval. Thank you.
Muito obrigado, Dr. Rago. A pergunta
agora... The question now is for me, Dr. Daniela Lucchetti. It's a pleasant surprise to find a Brazilian at FDA. We are happy and honored. Can you tell us how the participation of patients with rare diseases within the FDA? Good morning. I'm very happy to be here. It's an honor to be part of this event. I'm a geneticist, a doctor geneticist. I graduated in Brazil, in Uberlândia, and then genetics at the Unicamp. And after I came to the US to keep studying rare diseases. And the last year, I'm here at the FDA in the regulatory area when the drugs are submitted for our approval. Very grateful to see how the FDA has been expanding its work to include patients, to be focused on patients, like Mr. Rag was saying, a systematic approach to ensure the experience and the priorities of patients are being incorporated in a in an important manner. And in the development of these medications, we started from the beginning, before the research, we start beforehand. We're trying to incorporate in the meetings before the studies, so the studies will take that into account. We believe the patients are the expert to identify symptoms that are more important in their lives. As a doctor, even though with experience, we don't know the symptom that really bring problems and impacts in the family and the patient and the caregiver. What we've been doing are hearings with patients with 2 or 3 hours, where you have a roadmap of questions of what's relevant for us to understand what's related to clinical studies and drug approval, if they have an NGO or they come without being part of any advocacy groups that can talk about their lives, their daily lives, in the morning, in the afternoon, at night. That's what we want to hear from them. We want to hear in the meeting with the industry. We're bringing patients as well. They are part of the meeting in order to speak, to give their voice. It's important that you have clinical studies that they have under control in a scientific manner, aiming the patient and the most important symptoms. For some disease, it's important to improve how much he can walk. If he can walk 30 meters, 100 meters, 15 meters. If you don't have this condition, but only 100 meters, that's not nothing. But if you're leaving, that's a lot. Or if not, that's what you know when we, in this meeting, in this hearing, we can align that. We are also doing guidelines and guidances, documents, the FDA, the public documents of the FDA's, where we give guidelines for the researchers for developing the studies, but also for the industry to understand what's a good study, so we can have a quicker approval that comply with with all things. It's sometimes hard to find the Portuguese word. Sometimes one of our agendas is about rare diseases, about use and drug development. We see several issues. We offer solutions and guidelines so the approval can be expedited. And another issue in the last years, in our vision, how the clinical studies have been doing. We review several documents. We've been including a spreadsheet with patient experience, which is also important for the approval process. Very good, Dr. Daniela. That brings hope for everyone, the participation for patients, and that are going to be a great difference for the approval and these technologies. Another question, is it possible to identify the benefits brought by this dialogue between regulatory agency and patient? It has been helping to identify symptoms that are most important. The other thing is interaction enables what's the tolerance level that the patient has in a specific disorder, if we think that the patient would make him deaf, now we think that we shouldn't allow that because it has a risk level of death. But depending on the context, maybe that we don't have this problem. We have other issues that are greater. If we lose hearing, we are okay to take this risk. Also to understand in each disorder, and it's specific for each disorder, what's acceptable in terms of risk and what's acceptable in terms of if an expedite approval are going to take more risks, we're going to have less preclinical studies. That's something that we've been listening and how to and how to understand this drug safety, and also how how much how important are these outcomes. This approach has to be specific for each disorder and not having laws and regulation that don't apply for rare diseases. The quantity of people for lung cancer compared to MPS, they're very different. Yes, within the agency, we have been changing how we do that, how the statistical level will not be the same for a study with 2,000 people, while for a rare disease study with less, we've been using 20 patients. For another field, how did you do that? But that's how we do it, how we do this context, how do we work with these families and specialists in a better way. That's very good, very good. Thank you, Miss Daniela. Let's listen that with Miss Daniela. We can see how we see patient in the core of this process, how understand the patient as a key element developing clinical research, how Anvisa is in relation to this topic. First of all, good morning to everyone. I like to thank and to tell how I admire Tony and salute everyone here in the round table. Dr. Daniela brought many important elements. We also observed that our first experience engaging patients for regulatory frameworks, it was when we published the RDC 205, and this framework was it was firstly with the same approach that Daniela has mentioned to discuss previously before the study or before the registration, to have the insights from the patient insight to be part, each stakeholder has to be part of it to be able to have this discussion beforehand submission, and also to understand from the patient side who know the disease well, what are the expectations in regards to this new medication, this new technology. That was our first approach. It was very important. Moreover, this regulatory framework to have a 30-day deadline for approval to conclude for that, taking into account that this discussion had been done beforehand and that enabled this deadline that's very challenging, a 30-day deadline. we have observed that in Brazil, for example, Brazil has some features that affect the strategy when we receive clinical studies in phase 3 studies. That's that that limits the opportunities for Brazil to be part in the discussion. So protocols arrive when it had started in different countries, in global studies, and makes it more difficult the, our intervention. But we've been working as well in a front to promote a regulatory environment that's more attractive for phase 1 and 2. And Tony had this experience because he brought and he engaged a lot to bring studies in their initial stages. I believe that's very important. Daniela highlighted some aspects that are very important in terms of patient participation, and the outcomes are very important. The, the patient's opinion is very important, allowing the part to improve 3 meters, 30 meters. If that's a difference, is that their expectation? Also to give voice to the patient's opinions, so because they are the ones who are going to benefit from the medication, and they'll be able to tell us how relevant the benefit in comparison to the risk. This comparison is very important, and we have a lot to do, yes, but it was a very good experience, and certainly it helped us to start new actions that are coming in the future, and we're going to be able to count with the civil society, with Casa Hunter, with other organizations, for example. Thank you, Mr. Claudius Ver. Here on this round table, we can count with another another person, Mr. John Batista. His research with blood tissue, cells, and organs has been the core for several discussions in new technology in healthcare. We have already heard some consideration about the importance of placing patients in the center of discussions. I'd like to hear your perception of how we how we should address the issue in such a way to have patient in the center of the clinical research discussion. Thank you, Antoine, for the opportunity. Thank you to be here on behalf of Visa. We have here Cosvan, has a lot of experience and the honor to discuss with patients who are listening. It's very important that Anvisa and Brazil is here with the technologies for rare diseases in Brazil. When we talk about my area with gene therapy, with advanced tissue therapy, and I would like to contribute for this discussion. I agree with Dr. Daniela, Doral, Claude, who pointed very interesting things. Patients who are listening to us, you participate in a very important manner in any medication development, because during the studies we find the patient participation. So when we enroll in a study in terms of information, and when we talk about gene therapy, for example, in rare disease, we add the struggles to find scientific data for rare diseases, and also have to add the scientific importance for gene therapy, that those products are very new. The patient patient and also the family is very important in the research in order to provide information to the research. And those are the first steps. This understanding is very important. The patient is fundamental and the cause for the process. When you get a registration, this awareness that you patient are the most important element for development, that's the start point. Those are also they're talk about instrument that will be able to improve in terms of decision making for the regulatory agency, and that's something that we have to advance. I enjoyed the FDA ideas to have a structural elements in order to listen the patient in certain situations. In terms of advanced therapy, what's important to for Visa to have work groups and technical groups with experts in each sector, that because that's very innovative, and so this participation of the scientific community has been very institutionalized within a Visa. We have to use that to have the patient in this process. I'd like to highlight for you patient your participation in studies in this information is very important. Another point that I have to highlight for products that has been registered, and I see since my point of view, those products, we're talking about 17 products. So Brazil has two gene therapies that are registered. Those products have the conditions for follow up very close to the patient. We have to follow up. The gene therapy follow up has to be during 15 years. The patient, the family have to be very active in this process, in taking part, in providing information. So this product that's being approved, that's being used by the population, can to be continuously uh, followed up. You start the clinical moment when you ask the patient to learn a little bit how plausible that will be for it. The patient will be part doing phase one, phase two, phase three, the clinical design to develop this product, the patient's part of the process, and an active agent of the process. Without patient, there is no researcher or regulatory agency. And the patient has to be part post-registration. When the product is on the market, it needs some monitoring. Patient has to communicate to the agents and be part of the process of monitoring adverse symptoms, effects that doesn't finish that. The participation is very important. On Visa, right now in these elements, they have been trying to give instruments to be able to have expedite action without missing process. The acceleration process and registry for the Brazilian market doesn't need a, a great
Então, isso vocês fiquem tranquilos que todo o processo de aceleração que a Anvisa tem
sure that all sort of acceleration process that Anvisa has established for focusing and monitoring post-registration is done with a very, very rigid process, very for the country, we need to have the ability to service the patient. I think that's a short introduction, and I'd like to congratulate the discussion. It's important to be able to bring these new ideas, bring the patient for all these discussions, not only the technical process, but also decision-making process. That's very important. So thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you, Dr. João. Ms. Elizabeth, how does the pharmaceutical industry can help in this process with the regulatory agencies? Does it work? Good morning, everyone. Congratulations, Tony, for your work at Casa Hunter, Febra Raras. This is a very consistent movement. I'd like to congratulate and greet my fellow panelists and all of you who are here in person or virtually. Well, the regulatory agencies, they are very important. They are very important in any process for the pharmaceutical industry, for any product that you have in the market, but especially for a rare disease. If you take a look, we have our colleagues from Anvisa, for example. Anvisa today, the Brazilian equivalent of FDA, it has a privileged position as an agency. Anvisa is part of the steering committee, which is the highest level in the hierarchy of the regulatory agencies, the ICH. This group of 7 countries, especially, they are mainly comprised of the largest company in the world, but because all the merits that we have to that it has, Anvisa was called to be part of the steering committee, and it's important to have this interaction and partnership with all this experience with the global agencies, globalized countries. So I think what I can say is that Interfollow will continuously work with Anvisa in all those guide harmonizations. And this is an opportunity to maximize from our point of view. Another special role that we can mention that Anvisa has, not only the opportunity to bring external knowledge to the country, it also has a role in the future law that is going to be following Law 7602, the medication, the post trial follow-up will be for all patients. And that will allow Anvisa to create a robust database, a real-life database, like the life after the trial. For a rare disease, of course, this is extremely important. It's crucial to have this continuous follow-up with limitless time. That's very important as well. Not considering this, or not talking about this or that adjacent, but as the regulatory world, we have, I think in Brazil, we have 2 very important points for Brazil, of course. First of all, first of them is that the pandemic, unfortunately, it brought knowledge. It brought knowledge for the public sector as a whole, the executive areas or the legislative area, not only for health, but the importance of clinical trials. And us, from the health care sector, I'm from pharmaceutical industry. We have people from other industries here or for other positions. But this knowledge for all these external societies to empathize the need and importance of clinical trials in Brazil, because that's the only way that, of course, we are going to have investment without going to the economic side. But in this case, it's important to say investment need a certain market, a certain part of platform And Brazil has it, the population, how diverse this country is, but also legal safety platform. And we have our ups and downs, but we pretty much have it. So, and that we create appetite, and we create an appetite for investment. So, creation is a law project, and it's almost there to get voted. It's important to vote it, given the better knowledge that we have about clinical trials. That's crucial. And it's also crucial, a department dedicated in the Ministry of Health for rare disease. The Ministry of Health has been very successful in some initiatives, therapeutic initiatives, because they became a state policy. When it becomes a state policy, that's how the private sector can get in without its capacities, investments, and so on. So if you take a look of the 90s, like HIV, well, Brazil is an example country because the government put both hands to work, and we need to work together with the Ministry of Health so that we can have a department dedicated to rare disease in the ministry, and it must be a state subject. We have a first lady completely dedicated to that, and I think that is very important. And what is also crucial, of course, the private sector is important, together with the regulatory agency, so they can be more proficient. Interpharma, from among the 50 associates, we have like 30 companies working with rare disease. Our members, like a member. So we do have some sort of partnerships. We are very close to Anvisa. That's what I'm trying to say. To have continuous programs, we call it ECHO. It's an acronym to train, scientific training, collaboration with external information scientists making speeches. We have training courses that are ongoing all the time. So far we have like six of these courses only this year. I think the courses is a better word, like workshops. We have this interaction of a workshop. Let's call them workshops. And that's ongoing. And we have the participation of companies. We have the participation of external knowledge, a lot of knowledge brought from abroad to train our professionals here from Anvisa. So this is very important. But nothing for us is more important than the work dedicated so that Brazil to become a platform of investment for clinical trial. I'm repeating myself because for us at Interpharma, that's a mission. This country needs to have a regulatory framework, a business platform. Recently, the government, the executive has signed Law 1495. It's a very new law to attract investment. So this law tries to reduce bureaucracy, debureaucratization of processes. We do have an example here in terms of patents. Patents were subordinated to a previous Anvisa assessment. We have a great relationship with Anvisa, but it's not compatible. Anvisa know what they do, their car business, which is medication registration. When we are working in a law, that provides protecting a certain science. They're two completely different ways to say things. So this law intends to create a better way to do business. I think the pharmaceutical sector has to work hard to raise the bar in Brazil for clinical trial. We are number 25 in the world. Interpharma represents 51 labs internationally, and we follow clinical trials in the US, Europe. Interpharma has a lot of Japanese capital as well. So if you're not together with the powers, the executive, the legislative power, Brazil has ranked 10, 11, now it's number 25. Argentina, overran Brazil in everything related to research. If you don't have a solid platform for clinical trials in this country, especially for rare disease, I think it's going to be hard for us to progress, to bring investment. I'm going to repeat what Dr. Claudio said. We don't want to import continually all stages of a clinical trial. We want to develop it here. It is very important. So now is the time to act strongly with the government, legislative, executive, together with Anvisa, us, private sector, with our labs, so that we can have this opening for clinical trials, especially for rare disease. I think that's what I wanted to say so far. Thank you so much, Ms. Elizabeth, Dr. Abner. From your experience leading a pharmaceutical company, what are the greatest challenges that you see in building a culture where the patient is the center of all actions? Another relevant point is, do you believe that the patients or the family can bring important data or a unique perspective in terms of rare disease? Thank you, Tony, for the question, and thank you for the invitation. On our behalf, I'd like to thank Casa Hunter, and I'd like to greet all my fellow panelists. So I'm going to start with the second question. Is it important to have the caretaker, the family, and the patient point of view? Yes, it's crucial. Me, as a doctor, I can say that it's one of the most important factors. Nobody works with medicine and medications if we don't listen to the patients. Our colleagues has talked about that. Takeda has these characteristics of looking at the possibility of taking the opportunity of leveraging not only the patient's opinion, but what the caretakers want or what they have to say. Beyond that, we want to take a step further. We are in a world of technology. We have like 1,000 people connected here today. We have many people here connected with their smartphones, and we haven't leveraged it the best way possible. So it's going to come a time where smartwatches, smartphones, and other possibilities to capture information from these patients are going to make the life of these patients more comfortable. They won't need to go to the center so often. Sometimes those visits depend on travels and hard movements, and we're going to decrease the burden of people in research centers to accommodate the amount of patients to collect materials and so on that sometimes maybe could have been collected in a different way. So when we do clinical research, we focus on 2 points of the patient and medication journey. First of all, regulatory approval. Without that, we cannot bring the medication to the patient. But that doesn't guarantee that the patient will have access to the medication. Access to medication will happen through some agents, in this case, the Polytech for the public system, And at that time, this clinical trial will be revised. And the rares are rares, especially or also in this point of view. Our colleague from FDA said it very, very smartly, because we don't have head-to-head. It's the first treatment. We have limited studies from the classic, the mainstream methodological point of view that allows the approval of medication, but doesn't allow the medication to reach the patient. So it's very important to permanently look at the regulatory agents to allow the access that goes beyond this registration, the medication, the drug registration. We have some other studies of how the patient reports their results with certain medication. Everything needs to be taken as part of the set of evidences so that the drug can get to the patient. And that involves money, because most of the people don't have money to pay for the drug. So, and today the process that Conitec takes are public consultations. So the patients have the opportunity that they can organize themselves to tell from their point of view what happened. That is great, but we really don't know what is going to be the weight in the decision-making process when you compare to the clinical research. And that's something that we need to pay attention. Another point where we can bring comfort to the patient from the patient point of view, leveraging technology, and where we can progress in terms of the drug reimbursement, not based only in evidences, but also real life data, especially from patient report outcomes. I think that's very important. I was the last one to speak, but I managed to have some time and to bring some spice to this document. I think that's going to be a great, a very important talk for the patient as well. Yeah, we're going to have a round table to discuss that. The greatest challenge that we have in this country, I think, is to democratize the access. And for that, the patient must keep the center of the whole process. From an ethic point of view, we have a process to be taken into account. How does CANAP sees that, and how can it contribute in this discussion? Well, CONAP, the role of the CONAP, it coordinates like 150 ethic committees around the countries, universities, hospitals, Secretary of Health. The role of the system is to protect the participants in clinical trials or research. And this, from this side, we need to work the risk and benefits of each research concretely, because we cannot have a general parameter that we can apply to many people, because the reality might be different. Actually, the level of vulnerability of the patient must be also taken into account. A situation where the patient had just received a cancer diagnostic and is invited to participate in a clinical trial is different from the father who has a kid with a disease that he's been having this disease for decades or years, and this father or this parent is fighting to get a drug for their kids. So listening to patients is very important, especially taking into account the concrete situation they are on. The level of desperation, we can say that, of the maturity in the decision making by their family members, especially for kids with a rare disease. And that's a very strong criteria. It's very specific for each case. And we need to have a certain level of standardization, because of course we cannot have completely separate decisions one from another. But now we are in the process of certification of ethic communities in São Paulo. It's been a great challenge to establish a coherence in decision making so that every ethic community will make their own decisions. So listening to patients and feeling what they're talking about and understanding what they're talking about. Because in this case, the relationship with Tony has been wonderful, because we can see the relationship that's been established, the strength that he has to serve his kid or to help his kid, him and his wife Fernanda, and how that became progressively as advocacy for the whole set of patients with rare disease. For us, it was a huge motivation factor, and that is something that make us do all this effort that we have at CONAP. So our criteria has been that, like, to try to look at every case concretely and establishing the risk-benefit balance for a specific reality. And finally, I would like to talk about a project that you have in the Congress, in the Parliament. I think it's been a huge debate. We had some significant progress, but we still have some issues in this project. It's in the Congress. It has to go to the Senate. It's still gonna go through the debates. And our concern is mainly the CONAP autonomy. It's still not guaranteed from our point of view, because our previous writer decided to characterize it as CONAP to try to avoid creating a new body, because that will create a problem. The Constitution doesn't allow that this sort of to create the new agency. So we are using an existing agency, CONAP, but the project doesn't guarantee that everything it talks about, the mechanisms to guarantee the autonomy of the system, is valid for the current agency. So if it remains only for the decree, we're going to risk huge problems in the system further on. So it is an issue that we need to specify or make it to highlight it in the law, so we can. What we need is a breakthrough. We don't need a continuity, but we can be improved. Of course, that's what we're trying to do. But I think that the system has gained some recognition from the society, and with all that we did during the pandemic. So about the project, that's the main issue that I'd like to bring us you. So I'd like to greet everybody from the round table, and thank you so much, Tony, for the invitation. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. George. CONAP has been, since the beginning of our fight, a great partner, a very important partner to make the research for rare disease possible in our country. Thanks to CONAP we managed to bring research to Brazil. And these research are more and more reliable. Of course, I'd like to thank Anvisa so much. I'd like to do it through Dr. Claudio and Dr. João Batista. Anvisa has always received us with open arms to understand the need fast track to analyze researches in Brazil and make initial stage 1 and 2 projects or studies, make them available. And when you talk about rare disease, for those who don't know the Brazilian environment, in terms of regulations, Anvisa, CONAP, we are at the same level of the first world in terms of rare disease and others. We're very proud of Anvisa, very proud of CONAP. It makes us all proud, for us who know you. So what we need right now, we have a very important step to democratize the access to drugs and trials. We need to have an environment more favorable and modernize our health system in Brazil. So now we are at the end of this round table. I'm going to pass the floor to Dr. Abner for his final comment.
Dr. Abner? Dr. Rago, would you like to have any closing remarks right now?
Thank you. I had a question in mind, but because if we really want patients to be more constructive patient experts, part of the product development, I think we have a little problem there, because we have to look also the healthcare professionals. And I would say that even the healthcare professionals, as it turned out during the COVID, are not necessarily always well prepared for the product development, because many medical schools, they don't teach much about the product development. So you have the medical professionals sometimes eagerly entering into the product development, but they don't necessarily have the skills. And the same is about with the patients, because the nowadays product development, including the regulatory cycle, part of it, is very complicated, and it needs a lot of knowledge to understand, to better contribute. So is there in Brazil some initiatives that have put some emphasis of educating patients to get them as better patient experts, to be more successful and more fruitful, in participating in the product development? So there is some regions and countries where something like that is already ongoing. And why I'm asking is that Europeans have launched this, what they call the European Patient Academy Initiative, EUPATI, which is doing, I think, pretty good job. But as I said, always you can do better. So always room for improvement, but still good. And is there something like that going in Brazil? Or is there room for that? That's my concluding remark. I congratulate, of course, the panel and the whole initiative and the whole, what I was able to listen. That was really great. And I think you are on the right track. You do a great job. So congratulations, but little question as well.
Muito obrigado, Dr. Rago. Concordo plenamente.
Thank you, Dr. Rago. I agree with you. That's why clinic is two multicentric clinical centers are very good to capacitate, to train doctors how those therapies work, because doctors also need to learn a rare disease. Doctor has to go out to its comfortable zone to be part of public policy, to provide opinion to regulatory agencies, to CONITEC, and be part of this system together with the patient in order to make a difference. I think that in the following years, it's going to be mandatory to be some capacitation for the healthcare provider, because this need is going to come, and genetics is going to be included in any medical courses throughout the world, because that would be necessary to address all the demands. It's good to get opinions from abroad, experience from other countries will help us to advance and to improve our system in Brazil. Thanks so much for participating. Daniele, your closing remarks. I wanted to bring in part of everything has spoken in the round table is that patients they get they become specialists, and we can also if they can help Anvisa and the industry can help the patient to understand that when they are part of a study, because if they want to show the benefit, it's going to be quickly. When you drink dipirona for fever, we see the difference. So we can have a 2 month study, but it's for helping the patient to breathe better, to walk better, and the effect is not great. And that's the case for our diseases. We need long studies, 4 or 5 years, so we can assess the benefit, because sometimes a new drug will not bring benefit. We hope that, but we have to be ensured. Because sometimes there are some side effects, some adverse effects. So what we try to bring is the importance to highly controlled study, when we can only end after understand safety and how effective it is. We don't have to expedite that much because they are needed. Uh, Patients have to be associated to these studies, and they don't try to expedite conclusions. I believe that's the importance, as João has mentioned. But our closing message that patients should support those controlled studies so we can have the time, because we're trying to assess that in the best way, thinking about safety and benefit. John, also after approval is not the end of it. We also here we keep assessing. Also, that's set forever, because our controlled studies have 50, 100 patients, and they have some inclusion, so they don't represent the whole population. So after its approval, when it's available for everyone, we also have to see safety and benefit for the whole population. Those are my closing comments. A pleasure to be here. Thank you, Dr. Daniela. Thank you for participating and for FDA to taking part. That's very important. Dr. João? I'll speak the same line. Daniela mentioned very well, and also talking about education. I'd like to close with that. The health education, the patient's health education is important to have a full understanding of things, and that's applied to the study. And also like to highlight uh, something that Elizabeth told, and connect to Brazil, to have the Brazilian perspective, because we have a little experience with those advanced, and now that you're seeing phase 1 for these products, it's very important that the regulator, the researcher, the healthcare provider, we need to include in this process in order to be able to become a hub in studies to train the structures that do studies in Brazil. We have to show to the society that Brazil is able to provide that because we have scientists and professionals who can understand a clinical study design, and also they're able to understand regulatory. It's important for Brazil to lever research. We cannot forget about. Must have technical scientific infrastructure in order to develop that, especially in the regulatory area. We know there is a lot of scientific knowledge. We have great professionals, many good designs that can assess risk and benefit, but they don't know the regulatory. And Anvisa needs to disseminate those regulatory and this Brazilian infrastructure, and researchers need to discuss and know in depth the elements of the regulatory from the preclinic, developing, focusing in the patient, developing research, knowing that we want to get to a product going through patients through the regulatory. I would like to take the opportunity for this message because our dream that Brazil becomes a country that can develop clinical studies safely and bring new technology to Brazil. Thank you, Tony. Thank you for the partnership. We have become together. Our area of tissues and organs in Anvisa have experience with advocacy groups, we have the participation of hemophilia, hemophilic, and now we're talking about gene therapy. We're able to get to know your work, get to know Casa Hunter, and this partnership for the Ministry of Health to involve patients. That's very important for Brazil. Thanks so much, Joan. Let's be brief because we are very late today. So, Claudius Van, please. Now, to connect with Dr. João, there are many experiences, like blood area has this experience. Daniele also highlighted the FDA experiences and many other ones that we can learn with, and we can bring it to implement here in Brazil those guidelines. So it's important that the society has a space within the state. It has to be established. For example, Anvisa. I'm expert in that area, so we have a parliamentary advisor who interact with other institutions. I think we also need an open door to do an interface. Visa takes part in many moments during the life cycle of the medication, and the patient participation is very important. I would like to highlight that. And at this moment, clinical trials are they're talking about, is being discussed, and the relevance, the Anvisa's relevance in this process during the pandemic was a moment that's very important, also for the parliament to get involved and making the regulatory organization to be able to serve those expectations that we've been discussing here. Thanks so much, Tony. Thanks so much, Carlos Van. Now, Miss Elizabeth. For I hear, for example, other people who know this routine very well, the association life want to open pathways, pathways in different environments, in the Congress, Anvisa, internationally, ENPI. What we've been searching here with our bias as advocacy groups, what's been discussing here is what's the Brazilian appetite, both in the private and public sector, including agencies, to innovate for science, how far we want to go in science, how far we want to go in, to become attractive market for science with legal with legal with good legal environment. When you're talking about vaccine, that was a sector that suffered, there was a struggle within the Congress in many fronts, talking about pricing and even when protecting sciences. Now we have compulsory license. It's hard work because we're talking about public and private sector. We need to have a target, and we defend science and science developed within this territory, but the current conditions are with the current we are no won't be with the current condition we won't be able to innovate. What Brazil wants in healthcare and pharma? Do we only want to copy and paste sign and be restricted to be copy and paste? Of course, we have other stuff like generics, or do we want to really go in depth with science in a market of 200 million consumers, huge area? So we have to be together. This is not only for rare diseases, for pharma, for the doctors. Such big country, we have to embrace science, research, advanced therapies, including gene therapy, which is the one who is mostly highlighted to provide capacitation to improve those agencies. Uh, this task is very difficult for advocacy groups. It's very difficult, not only for the advocacy group but for everyone. We have to discuss medication for this patient who we value. It pays he pays 35% taxes. We have to talk about that. It's a hard agenda, it's challenging, but we are here for that. So we need to get together, favor innovation, favoring science, and really making this country more inclusive for 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 treatment, for life after study, and make their lives better and their family members favoring science. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Elizabeth. Now, Dr. Anner, only minute to thank you. I'm very happy to represent Takeda, to be here with patients, because our company, we live that every day, that we have patient in the center of everything that we do. We have a lot of work here because medicine has transitional truths. 30 years ago, what I learned 2 years ago is not real now, and what we're learning today is going to be overtaken. But what's happening in the future, it's important within Takeda that our works connected with the patient, with Anvisa, with CONEP, with every stakeholder, because in the end, we'll be able to overtake all these barriers, and we can play together in order to advance and quicker attract what's suitable, the suitable volume for science in Brazil, what makes sense for 200 million population, and in that way do our work. What we want to help patients to have a better future today, what we can offer. Thank you very much. I'm very happy, but I'm not satisfied. And my satisfaction is going to happen when you're going to be embracing to make it things better for everything as quick as possible. Thanks so much, Dr. Arner. Thank you, Dr. George. Thank you for this debate. It was very interesting, the importance, the participation, the associations, and everything in the system is very relevant. And I would like to highlight, and that's happening in CONEP, and I believe that's very positive, and that will be very important to keep that. It'll be choosing how CONEP is composed. Most part of our members are referred by hospitals, by study centers, and this process we receive those CVs from sites and have people from the ministry and from CONOP, and this mechanism has been very important because there is not a majority opinion, and the only way to approve is by convincing the other part. And the best academics are coming to CONOP, to the economy. We have a high quality of professor with this procedure, and keeping an independent CONEP, which is connected to the patients, this process is very important to be preserved. And I believe this matter is very relevant, and you have to highlight here in order to continue in a positive way and progressing with laws and ensuring what we were able to do it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. George. I would like to thank you all for the participation. It was very important. I would like to highlight that this clinic is not very important for the areas that have been highlighted, but they also save lives, because most people, they are the only way to access and for people to save their life. They don't have time to wait. Rare diseases, they progressive. Many children, they die before they are 5. Research is how you can access how their lives can be changed, the family life can be changed. We count with you in order to transform medicines, because with research we can transform medicine. Thank you to everyone. It's an excellent event.